You are in for an interesting ride.
Hello everyone and welcome to another ET Newsroom presentation. And this time it's with Peter Vincent, our Dowsing detective. Now I went to join Peter up in Tunbridge Wells to hear, as usual, shares his findings, no matter what the case, whether it involves police, the authorities, archaeological and otherwise, different nations. So everybody who needs to be informed and who is involved, they will have this information. The secret services, MI5, MI6, and anybody else, they will know. So Peter has some very interesting stories related to things ET, which we'll share on another video of something he told me just today, the 26th of June, 2023, that I will share with you when I have him to camera, perhaps, or maybe I'll record our phone call about those ET events. Meanwhile, we'll also do another short video on a follow-up to the Nicola Bulley case, to Madeleine McCann, and on the girl who said she was Madeleine McCann as a young adult, and also of the submersible. And there are a couple of other events that I want to share with you that we recorded whilst I had him with me. Enjoy, and don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Hello everyone, this is the ET Newsroom and it is the 11th of June 2023. I'm with Peter Vincent. We're in Calverley Grounds and we thought we'd bring a whole pile of papers and maps and images to share with you and spread them out on this table here. However, we've got a light breeze going on and so we're not able to do it. We've already tried and it is just going everywhere. So I'm going to get Peter to do an intro for us and just tell us what we're going to do. And one of the things we're going to start with is look at these pieces of innocuous looking shards of detritus, perhaps, beach found.
Also, having looked at Skinwalker Ranch programme and their maser, they found that they've got metals underneath the maser, and they mentioned two rare earth minerals. One of them is beryllium, and I struck a code for beryllium, so it's orange, brown, yellow, black, blue and brown again. So brown is in that code twice. Now I thought I would test this on various objects. I'd also just recently been to Swanage for a couple of day trips, and walking along as I do on the beach to look for things washed up, this very interesting item showed forth. It looks like either a fish or a key, and it has a very shiny surface, and to all intents and purposes somebody might say, oh, slate. I took it to Salisbury Museum and spoke to a lady there who asked me to send pictures of it, which I have, and she thought it had been cut and actually pointed out that it did look as if it had a couple of eyes on the front. So the question is, what on earth is it and how does it respond? So what I discovered was, when I used this code, which is colour dowsing, as we all know from the Dowsing detective series, when I go over this object holding this code, I get a very strong deposit to beryllium. So how does beryllium get on a piece of what we think is slate? However, just the other day a slate slid off my roof and the house was built in 1879. So I got a bit of that slate here and I thought, well, we'll see if that's slate. So I went over this with the beryllium code and no response whatsoever. When I go over the other one, I get a response. Come off that, come on this one, no response at all. So it's not slate. This is a metal of some description. And that means that this has to be something alienic, because that is a semiconductor material. Now, why on earth would you get something ancient washed up in the shape of a fish? Oh, it could be a key, who knows? It also has a very interesting cross on here, using the actual veins in the material as a sort of a cross. on one of the raised areas. So when you turn it up the other way, you've got a raise here and a raise there. It almost looks as if it fitted into something at some time. Well, we all know that there's been crashes on Earth for, well, probably millions of years, and people don't think outside the box, they only tend to think inside the box. But now, of course, ancient archaeology, Ancient Aliens, these series on Blaze TV, it's all now coming out, and even the military involved, and I believe that NASA has now got 16 specialists working on all the information they can find. Now, what is interesting about this, I've actually got some models that the ancients made of flying craft, and I'm going to show you how this code also shows on there, because one of the biolocation team, Don, who worked with Geoffrey Crockford and Nigel Hughes, said that they felt that the space people, highly space orientated, occupied down here, mining down here, also mined asteroids and meteors, and the dust, they couldn't want the dust because it interfered with space travel. So they brought the dust back, apart from the minerals that they were taking the particles out from. And the ancients, the local tribes, may have had use of this dust to make their models with into a cement paste. We call it pudding stone in ancient chambers and ancient temples. People who are interested in archaeology of the Stone Age and the Druid Age, Druidic Age, should know about pudding stone. So I'm now going to show the response on some of these models.
So Peter's now going to have a look and testing these objects, various ones which he believes are created, they're fashioned artifacts. So Peter, perhaps you could give us a little bit of background about where these have come from.
Yes, well, basically wash up from deep oceans because sea levels have risen by some 300 to 400 feet since the Ice Age. So people tend to reside near water. So what was rivers and things coming from the ice flows in the north, basically sea levels rose, so they had to go back to higher ground, and then all the settlements and everything that was under the ground or things then just got left, and fossils show up, casts show up. The question is, for our perspective, as to what do they respond to. Now, what is interesting in the space dust, that you get platinum, iridium, gold in the mix, plus all sorts of other items that they were mining for. You shouldn't get that in an ordinary pudding stone cement mix unless they had access to it. Now, how can anybody, let's say 6,000 plus years, or even from the Bronze Age, have access to those sort of minerals? Gold perhaps, platinum I doubt, iridium, well, there's a bit in gold I think, but the problem is this, it's these rare earth metals that wouldn't have had any use to, although I believe in Mexico they found mica and all sorts of other things below pyramid temples under them when they're mining out to find chambers and things. So perhaps they got the use of materials from space people, basically.
So what are we going to be testing
right, well,
these for,
we're using
Peter?
the beryllium because basically they shouldn't have had any access to that at all. So I get the code for beryllium from my source. It's in, if there's a particle or so plus in there, I should get a response, because the colours will react on my mind, the Sentry system, because that has been programmed for that chemical or metal or mineral, and those are the codes that should detect it. So therefore I will now advance to here, see what happens. And there's a strong force over that delta wing craft there, so that substance is in that there. So I'm now going to look at this one here, which is slightly different mix than that. Somebody might say it's cement. Well, we know that cement has been around an awful lot longer than the people are given credit for, because basically it's been found in the Pacific Islands, I believe, by archaeologists and researchers there. So let's have a look at this one. Yes, there's a slight drag on that. So there we are. And just to make sure it's nothing to do with the particles that got left on there, we'll put this down here on the ground. And yes, it still crosses. So that, in other words, beryllium is in that. So you've got a rare earth metal mineral in that cement mix there. And this is a craft. If you look at the front of it, you've got two eyes on the nose of the cabin. And then if you look around, the left-hand side is worn away, as always. It's like a gull at the back. It sort of comes thicker at the back than the front. That is exactly what I believe was shown in a picture about observations out of the International Space Station, that the astronauts up there had seen this sort of craft staring at them, the gull-wing craft. So have we got anything in there? Let's have a look. And that is a very good pudding stone, because you can see the mix in there and you can see all the little bits and pieces in there which represent one thing or another. So here we go. Yes, that's even stronger actually than that one as a response. So I'll do it again. So there's a very good response to that. So now we'll try this. This basically is fossilized metal. The sea has actually turned it into a paste, and that shows you how old this must be, because metals have been found. I believe there was a hammer found, the wood had turned to coal basically, and the metal had crystallized. So the question is, how old then? Because it takes hundreds of millions of years to crystallize, let's say, iron or something like that. So somebody was using a hammer or an axe or something, mining millions and millions of years ago. So let's have a look at this now. Yeah, slight drag on that, not as big a drag as that. Just to do this one here, which is completely different. This is something designed to hold in the hand, and you would have worshipped your god with that, and you would have had something in there representing the god. I took this to a jeweler to see if he could work out what this metallic substance was, and he broke a diamond tip drill trying to drill a hole in it. So that shows you how tough it is. And
what makes you think that's something to do with worship?
Well, because they had holding stones that they held in their hand.
Is this something known? I don't know
yes,
about
well,
that.
they used to worship things, and they used to make it to fit in the palm of their hand, so they had something, you know, connected to the gods, basically.
Oh, right.
We're going to go over this now. Yeah, quite as strong, much stronger than that. Much stronger. See, the problem with this system we got is something called quantification. You can have a sandpit and you have several grains of gold in it, and you'll get a response to gold. But you can have a gold bar buried in there and you'll get the same response. Somehow we've got to work out quantification. But all we know is that that sort of particle mix is in there, but what percentage of it is unknown. One of the things we can do, instead of holding the colours, we can do what Geoffrey Crockford used to do, something called a witness. So if there's something in here that's in there, then that should respond exactly the same as if you had coded it into a colour. So we call this a witness. So we hold that like that in the hand, and we go over here and look at that, an enormously strong response. Just holding this bit of something found on Swanage Beach, and I found a spearhead on there once before, and a year before an owl. I always look at all beaches to see what there is. Now we're marked to see what happens with this one here, and it's very strong response. So let's have a look, see how much stronger the response is on this than perhaps using the colour. Yeah, quite. So basically there is something relating to material in that which you could say, oh, it's slate, but it isn't slate, because we've tested this here. So in theory I shouldn't get a response to this in there, which is the bit that came off my roof.
So this is actual slate?
Yeah, yes, because it was on built with the house in 1879. Nothing, no response, no drag, nothing. So that's very interesting. So that is not slate, that is something that looks like slate, but it isn't. And it's got semiconductor material in it. And that's what I'm trying to draw attention to. How on earth did the ancients get their hands on materials that we are only now fighting over worldwide where they're found? So my code could actually be used over maps and photographs to try and detect more deposits of this sort of material, which is vital for the space race and aviation, etc, etc. There was also another rare earth metal that they found in the Skinwalker Ranch. Utah University pointed this out to them. I think it's called europium, and I got no response to that at all. I coded that into a number, I haven't painted it up, I had no response to any of that on there whatsoever. We've got something which we found in 2004 called Project Y site. It's a crash site. not far from here.
And people can see that.
We were led to that by the discovery of the arrowhead-shaped burial in the grove.
Can we have a look at what you've got here?
Right. So what I've got here, this is uranium, and that's red, yellow, orange and grey. And this was tested in 2004 at a leading London museum, because we were asked to see whether we could find a site of a former silo in South London that had been used for the defence of London during the Cold War, now deactivated because the person testing us lived near there. And we found this on the map. We found it on orange 4, which is that colour there, and this uranium code. So orange 4 and this uranium code, and we all got that, which means that that site is still active with some minor radiation relating to what was in there. I mean, even an X-ray department of a hospital will still emit X-rays through the lead. You can go over a hospital on Google Earth and still pick up radiation coming out of it. There's a bit of a radiation there.
Testing for uranium, let's see what we've got.
Forward here. Yeah, there is quite a strong drag on that. So that's got
So that's responding to uranium.
Yeah. Now, whether this thing on Swanage Beach came up, but what I'm saying is that something on that responds to what's in the mazer at Skinwalker Ranch. No, there's nothing there whatsoever. So there's no response to uranium on that, I'm pleased to say. And we'll have a look at this now. As I said, it doesn't represent a craft at all. It's got some material from a craft across it that looks very much like a metal, but possibly a ceramic type of material. But it's so strong, it broke a diamond tip drill. So that gives you some idea. Yeah, there's a bit of response to that.
Well, that looks quite a strong response.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is to use some of these other codes, because on Project Y, we actually found...
Project Y being the site of a crashed ancient site.
And also anything that we've been asked to look at around the world. For instance, if a craft has landed near a school, for instance, or they're a crashed craft, these two codes seem to respond to all the things, and we don't know what they are. We call one of them Oxysaurus, which is that one, and this one we called xylominium. So I gather that these are materials used in the construction of spacecraft. They know what they are, but you know, we just extract some sort of idea as to what they want to call them, because we don't know what these things are. So we'll just hold one of these over that. Oxysaurus sounds dinosauric, doesn't it? And yes, a very strong response. So that material is in there. So it's representing a spacecraft. So you notice that the left hand side is worn off, because basically it's shown at the right hand side of God being the left hand side. I don't know whether anybody who's going to view this looked at the coronation ceremony, but a lot of information in there fits this ancient situation, because the king was given a glove on his right hand, and then he was seen coming out of Westminster Abbey with the orb in the left hand. Well, the orb is the communication between earthly and the gods, the spheres, the orbs. And also notice it was a gold glove and a gold former dress. Well, if we look at Odysseus sending Jason out for a golden fleece, I happen to know that Odysseus was on one of the Ionian Islands, and they have goats there, but they don't have sheep. I don't think they mine gold there either. Gold blocks dowsing, it blocks your mind. This is why kings wear crowns, because gold blocks.
By that, what you mean is they're unaccessible to anybody.
They can be interfering, yes, to read their minds. Okay. Yes, various people. But if this is why people of certain faiths don't like their photographs taken, because basically, if you can code the photograph of that person, first of all establishing whether they're alive or dead, because there's a code for alive and a code for dead. Then, if they're alive, well, then you get the middle aura code. So there's sex code at the top, the middle aura code, and then the condition code. You know, you can actually access their mind. This is mind-to-mind communication, but the brain, because the brain is not activated, it's just the mind, therefore the person doesn't know it's going on.
Well, let's have a look
at these other codes.
So xylominium, this is again a rare kind of
metal in spacecraft.
that
Yeah.
you and the bilocation team came upon, but
Yeah.
it's not known in normal.
It might be, but under a different name, you see,
Oh,
that's
right.
the point. But the
Okay.
problem is this, it doesn't seem to fit our sort of aircraft. So it may well be something that they've got.
So xylominium,
Yeah.
as far as we know,
Yeah.
as we speak today, isn't known by the world in general.
In general, no.
But
no.
but as you say,
but the mind understands it because the codes were given to us by 42.
who are the ET lot?
Yeah, who are the
Okay.
ET lot, and therefore we paint them up to the numbers that they give with the strict colour codes, and therefore we see if the materials we're going over, whether it be on the land or on a map or on a photograph, because the facts and photographs capture what's in the ground in magnetically terms. Yeah, there's a strong response there, and of course they go over as well. But I'm going to test the Swanage Beach item against this particular metal here. I haven't done it yet.
So xylominium, here we go again.
Xylominium, yeah. Nope.
No, nothing at
No,
all.
so those two exotics. So basically what it's saying is, it's almost as if it's a mineral they found. It's got a sheen on it, you see, this very strange sheen. And you don't get that with slate. It's also got two layers here. I mean, you don't get slate in Devon, Dorset, Cornwall. You get it in Wales. And there's masses of it. So if I was to hold this here over that, nothing, it's just dead as a dodo. So the question is, it's not pure slate. So something's been done to this that's changed that. Now,
Are you saying that that was some kind of slate at some point?
well, it could have been, yes,
Oh, right,
but
okay.
by the looks of it. But as somebody said, the archaeologists pointed out to me that it does appear that they've made a point of two eyes on here. This idea of eyes is quite interesting because that's what we got on the front of the craft. So people think it's a bird, flying bird, you see.
And you'd say that was their cockpit.
Yeah, the cockpit, yeah. And again, the right-hand side of God is this, and the left-hand side's worn off. Always the left-hand side is worn off. It's just a symbolic thing. If they made a spearhead, they would chamfer off the left-hand side, or an arrowhead. And this is, the God side is the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is the human side, basically. We only use the codes on the left-hand side, and we use the colours on the left-hand side. And when I mean the left-hand side, you've got the para field, the left and the right, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 legs, 2 arms. So those are your para fields. So that's my left-hand side, that's my
Paramagnetic.
right-hand side. So that's the left-hand side's godly side, this is the right-hand side. The dia is the middle, basically, and the ferra is what takes the message up the nervous system to the mind. So the mind is basically a colour computer that interacts with the brain. In theory, this colour code system should work in other ways beneficial to us, because if you can program your mind to do certain things, you can also program your mind to be defensive against an exterior attack, for instance a virus. So if you can code the virus and then get a code to protect you against the virus, what happens is the mind instructs the brain not to react against that particular code valuation in magnetic terms. If the body is attacked by that virus, there won't be a reaction, because it's the reactions that kill you. Like your temperature goes up, all your waterworks go.
But also, talking about that blocking business, you've created a blocking code.
Yes, there is a blocking code.
And an
There's also an
unblocking
unblocking code. Yeah. I think Lord Rees, he wrote a book, The Power of Numbers, and I think I heard a radio programme when they're being interviewed. He said that actually everything can be put into numbers. Absolutely everything. What is interesting, we're using a temple code of 1 to 16 plus a couple of extra things for an atom and nuclear, bringing us up to 19. You all know the barcodes you've got on products you buy in the shops. Well, perhaps people don't realise that there's a charity in London that basically codes all barcodes worldwide for products. So each product has a separate barcode. They only operate 1 to 16. And you can have hundreds of billions of combinations, because as I've used in deuterium, you can have brown in twice, provided you've got other colours between. So you could have cut brown in 4 times with other colours in between. So this is what I mean. So basically your barcode, your magnetic things are those, and then the number values are like 7, 3, 10, 5, 8, 4 would be the numbers along the bottom. So it's basically a representation of the barcode. But we use 1 to 19, so you can imagine you could code every single person in the world, plus every product that's known to mankind, on these colour codes. And that's what's happening, because I've yet to find asking for a code that I've ever got one that's the same as another code. It's also interesting that people who have asked me how we do this find that they try and do it themselves without a 42 code and find that they can do something for a few hours and then it peters out. Whereas if I give them a code that's come through the 42 code, they're able to keep that code and use it for the rest of their life if necessary. So his 42 does not like wasting time and stupidities because basically your mind is communicating with something and it doesn't want to waste time and effort. You've already been told it works. So,
okay, well, let's have a look at some water then, shall we? Okay, so are you going to use those 4 codes together?
Together, yes.
And just remind me what we've got.
Plutonium, strontium, cesium-135 and nuclear explosion.
Right.
In theory, you should get a stronger response if you hold all 4 codes together. But if I put a wrong code in there, it kills the whole lot stone dead. That's your double check, you see. Very strong, yeah. So if I then use this one here, which is nuclear explosion, you know, crosses over there. So if I now use plutonium-239, so something that happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, the particles are still showing in some watch, you see. Plutonium, now this is cesium-135. Yeah, that's quite strong on that. And then this one is, what is that, strontium. Yeah, it's there. So basically, singly, they all work, but I get a much stronger response when I put them together. Now, I understand you bought some Hastings seawater up.
I did.
What I will say about this here, that the people living in the area of this do suffer an awful lot of thyroid problems, and they put it down to the fact that the seaweed is contaminated in the sea, and the seaweed was put on the agricultural land for fertilizer, and so the contamination just goes up and down, up and down, up and down all the time. So the tomatoes you eat and the fish thing. So it doesn't matter to a tourist going there, or anybody, let's say, who might be born there, may well have to take thyroid tablets and blame on the Ukrainian nuclear explosion.
You're not talking about Chernobyl?
Yeah, I suppose we are, yeah. That, you know, the contamination blew down, went all over the place. We got it over here as well, I think.
But as I understand, in this particular area, unlike most
this is
places,
caused through ancient nuclear warfare.
Ancient.
And
that's where we're getting. That's what we're getting at.
Other people have been researching this in America, and also there are areas known for this. For instance, the Dead Sea, the Gulf near Jordan. Though Israel has tested nuclear explosions, nothing to do with that. This is the seawater. But the body will pick this up. That's the point. If I can pick this up in the codes, the body is picking this up on its natural.
Okay, well, let's try the Hastings
seawater. Yeah.
I know we did put a little bit of tap water in with that because my bottle had opened. But anyway, mate.
Nothing.
Nothing at all.
No, and I go over here.
Oh.
Cesium-135, right? Nothing. There's no draw on there whatsoever. When I go over here is a draw.
Yeah, right.
You know when the draw is because your mind reacts to the draw. It's just as simple as that.
So Hastings seawater
is quite nuclear free.
Nuclear, radioactive free. That's good news.
Yeah.
Wanting to do this test actually for a long time. And
somebody once told me the best diviners are those who've never done it before, because they don't know what to expect. Suddenly this happens. And they go, well, I never did anything, you know.
Here, Peter believes is an artefact.
Whereas through one eye,
it does look like a
alien face.
A little alien grey face. Yeah. And also on the other side, Peter, do you want to show us that?
Yes, you have the mouth and the 2 eyes. The big mouth, you know, humans have got big mouths.
So you're thinking that relates to...
Yeah, but they put the string through it.
Human on one side and ET on the other.
ET on the other.
That does look like. So going back to Madeleine McCann, there was
a young lady
who thought that she was possibly Madeleine McCann.
Because of the eye. She had a bit of an unusual background and also had an eye pattern that was similar. We, as remote viewers, used the McCann code. We removed the black and yellow from the McCann code. So basically, we bent that up like that and then hold that like that. In fact, we didn't have it on there. We were better to remove it. And went over here, and there was absolutely no response whatsoever at all. So we reported that. And then they insisted on having a DNA test done, which was done, and it was found that there was no DNA connection at all. This is Madeleine McCann's personal code.
If this was her, these years later, would have responded.
Would have responded,
Yeah.
It didn't. It was proved by DNA that it didn't. So the thing is, this system is actually lethal.
There's no hiding.
There's no hiding. And there's also no hiding in your image either, because somebody can home in on your image and extract your whole life story by asking you questions.
Well, that's what ET seem to do, don't they?
Yeah, well, that's what they do, because we're all on their radar. It's they who provide the codes.
Yeah.
Basically, we are all connected, you see. So now the other thing too is...
So I've just taken the same picture that we were looking at on my tablet. So Peter is just going to demonstrate how...
With the same code as we've had. Yeah.
If we can still pick it up from an electronic device.
That, yeah. Look.
Immediately.
Immediately, yeah. The image caught in the photograph has just been transferred to the tablet. The use of my code can, in actual fact, save printing maps off and things like that.
Or do it on your phone.
Or do it on your phone, yeah.
I'm not going to show it on the phone just now.
Yes, because I said you should only, if you're dead, you should only have your tissue in one place. The grave, or if you're cremated, there's a cremation code in a cemetery. Or you're scattered at sea, and in fact you'll still respond the way that this dimensional thing works. So other than unless you've had something taken from you and donated to somebody else, you shouldn't be moving about dead whilst you're alive. So basically what we found was, oh dear, why is this area here responding here, and why is that area there responding? Now, I'm not going to go into too much. I did report this. But
Can we say what these areas
these are? Well, I don't want too much to be recognised in the map, right? Okay. But this shows an area of a residence and an area of a place of work. And we did get a correlation between the two with the McCann code. As far as I'm concerned, I've made my own opinion up, and I think other people may well have done. But what is interesting, I then thought, well, I'll go in and have a look at the person there that might be involved in this. I coded that person, and what is interesting, and I'm not going to guarantee this, but I have the code for the receiver as 137128492. The code of the donor is 137129824, with 10 and 5 added. So look, if you couldn't have had a perfect match, quite frankly, 9824 against 8492. In other words, as close a match as possible.
Even numerically. That's
numerically,
really
yeah, and that's because, as one famous scientist said and has published, every single atom can be put into numbers. Everything in life can be put into number values, and those numbers can be put into magnetic colours. And it's those colours that the mind, as a computer, is computing.
Well, the conclusion here and what we're talking about is organ transplant.
That's very, very controversial, basically, because witchcraft.
Well, it could be, but also if it's done in certain ways, it's not illegal, of course.
No.
We hear about them all the time. And I myself, once upon a time, worked with the National Blood Service some years ago. I met a wonderful Indian lady who'd had, I remember it was a liver transplant or a kidney, I really forget now, but the thing is, she was teetotal and she wasn't into rock music, and this young white girl had died in a car accident, was able to donate the organ, and this lady in conversation with her was an absolute delight, and she said, and you know what, we call her Sarah. She said she likes particular rock music, and every now and again I let her listen to it. She also likes a beer now and again, so every now and again I will have a beer.
Well, this happened in America, didn't it? Because somebody
picking up the frequency of the donor.
Had a donation from a convict, took up the life of crime after, was arrested and taken to court, and he was actually exonerated because he picked up from the organ the traits of the thing. Apparently things like the heart, the liver, the kidneys and various areas actually contain like a library of the person's soul, I think is what you're saying. This is why I think it's far better to have tissue taken from you and a 3D model made of your own tissue put in rather than somebody else.
Fascinating
Now,
stuff.
we did look at somebody called Suzy Lamplugh.
So this next segment, Peter, you said it might be a little bit controversial.
Controversial.
We did. I just want to finish off on the organ transplant business with Madeleine McCann. What you're talking about here, what we're talking about is illegal transplant. So that's the difference. We're not talking about somebody.
No, we can't prove that.
That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So it is controversial.
It is controversial.
But I think actually it's a massive business.
Well, it is. I mean, we only saw this people from Nigeria brought the young lad over, and then he suddenly twigged what was happening. The doctors did in Vietnam. Apparently, the ages of the night were were taken from them and grown up and then used for organ transplants.
We hear
all sorts of things.
There's some terrible stuff in that field, but
we have to. All we're doing is
following the frequencies is what we're actually doing, which as it keeps coming up positive in so many different cases.
And don't forget, it's not only me, it's other remote viewers as well.
Yes. Yeah,
it's not only me, it's other remote viewers. And they're picking up the same. And for instance, Joe is my friend. If it doesn't match, he'll say, I can't get a response to that. Okay, right. But a little bird did tell me that Special Branch used to use this donkeys years ago. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if other services use this because it's not only this sort of thing. You can literally code anything.
Yeah.
Gin, whiskey, fags, I mean.
Let's get back to Suzy Lamplugh,
She was an estate agent's lady, and she had to, was it a Mr. Kipper or something that she had to meet at an address?
Yeah. To show him a property.
And he was supposed to be some sort of a military man or something. The police were looking for digging up gardens and things all over the place. And I used to go over these maps or back gardens and find nothing, say there's nothing there, Anyway, I just thought out of sheer interest. Having got a photograph, I coded that. I thought, well, we'll start from square one. So I went over, I painted it up. Yeah, here we are, Suzy Lamplugh. Again, female silver, pink, grey, orange, red, black and yellow, right? That's because you're deceased. If she was alive, you would just have those on the top there like that, you see. Went over the whole of the UK and found just one response that's dead. But I'd also gone over America, Canada, Europe, and I got a response in Canada. Now, this is extraordinary because you came in on this one. I found a response in White Lakes, Ontario, on the move, in a yachting marina complex. So I just looked it. And I'm not saying where this is, but it's in Dorset. There is a house that has a tree in the back garden, and I think there's a body or remains under that tree in the garden. The tree's now grown quite tall. And it's very funny that the police were digging up a back garden sometime, never found anything. But all I can say is that we got a response to that in White Lakes, Ontario, and then you came in because you said, that's absolutely amazing because I've got a contact or something.
Yes, it was from the Eclectia album, actually, the documentary which I was putting together. One of the Canadian contingents, who's on the album, Peter Nelson, had tragically died, and I didn't know where he'd lived, but in the obituary it talked about White Lakes, Ontario, and then within a day or two you talked to me about White Lakes, Ontario, and I just found that absolutely extraordinary because, as I said, I'd never heard of it before, and I was doing something about Peter Nelson by way of an obituary, I guess, because he was on the Eclectia album, so that was really extraordinary. And I believe I picked up the frequency of Suzy Lamplugh there as well. So that was just strange.
Yeah. We just do this for the scientific study research point.
Yes, exactly.
Because it must be possible to put these things into some sort of machine if it's magnetically connected somehow. Let's put it this way. I didn't realise that these colours that I was working with had power values. It was about 18 months, nearly 2 years after I started, we had this sort of order. And then one day I went to the Winchester Great Hall, and the round table that Henry VIII had painted was hanging on the wall, and I had a card. I got that card out and I looked at these colours and I measured them up against colours that we got. And I just said, something led me to believe, is there a computer code that I can use with these colours? I got a yes. So I said, can I have the code, please? So they gave me codes 1 to 12, I think it was, or 1 to 10 along the top. And there were dashes and lines, and there weren't noughts and ones as we use in computer. And I said, can you give me 4 words or something like that, related to this system? So they gave me 4 lines of words in hieroglyphs, basically. So I gave them to my son, I said, because he was a computer programmer, and I said, do you think you could work with this in these angles, see if there's a program here? And he said, no, it's got to be in noughts and ones. So I went back and I said, just something quite just led to me. I don't know whether I'm receiving information in. I just said, do these colours have power values? Yes. So I said, can we have the colours in the order, please? So they gave me the colours in the orders 1 to 16, then the shades thereafter, pink, bronze, pale blue for time, that sort of thing. And then I coded the round table and it added up to 33, and it was the mine data code. So I said, these 4 messages they gave me were the key, the chip, the instruction and the data. And that was exactly the 4 rows of things and the colours. So I painted the colours up. And what is interesting is the key has brown in twice with another colour in between. So you couldn't accidentally found it because you wouldn't put the brown in twice, I realised then that we had the key to all of this. It's a mine computer code, and the round table was basically based on that. And I was able to give them power number values, and that was radionics, which L. War invented, where he had his little machine with dials on it, and somebody came in with a medical condition. You would turn the dial according to the answers and the questions, and then you'd give them this strip of paper with these numbers on, and just say, read this in the morning, read this at lunchtime, read this in the evening, 3 times a day, into your mind, should correct. Now, this is very, very interesting because when COVID-19 came in, I was doing mind-to-mind communications and the message came through virus. So I thought, right, can I have the code for the virus? So they gave me the code for the virus for COVID-19 and I painted the codes up. So I said, is there a protection code? Yes. Is there an antibody code? Yes. So I painted them all up. I went over the map and I picked up the Philippines was responding. So I reported that. And then I picked up the south coast of England coming along, started to respond. And then, of course, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. This was a flu pandemic, by the way. You can call it whatever you like, but this is Asian flu coming back again, which they weren't able to code in those days. So I gave Don these codes because as time went on, and he was able to test people for antibodies. That was it, antibodies having had it, basically. You've had it code, that was the other one. And he said it responded on people who had it. It actually responded on people who didn't have it and also protected people against who hadn't had it at all to stop getting it. My wife and I never came down with this at all. I had the code, so I reported all the codes out. And this means that the mind can actually build in through the numbers and the power values of the colours, which go up the ferrous system, can tell the brain, if that virus hits the body, do not respond to it. It's the response to the virus that actually kills you, basically. So a red light shows, you're blocked. And therefore you don't respond. Although you might have the virus, you don't react to it, so therefore you don't get it. So I can only presume that that is how people using this code system, like vets, have picked up viruses in animals, and they were never believed about this, so they were tested. They had one infected animal in the whole herd, and the vet picked up the correct infected animal. This was in France, I think. There is something about this colour system, and that's what the Rosetta disc is, that the French priest Mega, who was a middle-aged priest, I think came from France, developed this colour wheel, basically, that when you touch these colours, they react on the mind and allow the mind to do certain things. And Alan Hayday was the one who told me about it. I never had anything to do with any of this at all. Absolutely not. So he said, if you hold black and yellow, it picks up bone in the ground. If you hold green, it picks up dirty water, salt water, caves and tunnels below the ground. And white picks up holy water, purple hits up spring water, blue, free, picks up tap water. So you pick up, and all our pipes in the road are coded because gas is yellow, so gas pipes are yellow. Water pipes, blue, water's blue, that's why the water pipes are blue. So you see, psychology, people are already using this, red and black for electricity, for energy. Yeah, the difference is that when you're working over an area, you can't quite fine-tune it, but you know that there's a cable under there because you've got a cross. So you lift the floorboards up and find the cable. Don't just start drilling a hole. The problem is that this system has to be known. Utterly has to be known, but it's obviously known by people who don't want other people to know about it. But we find it very useful for doing certain things, you know.
Hi folks, I just wanted to read some bits and pieces from an email or two that Peter has sent regarding Nicola Bulley. So bear with me because I think it's interesting and bears hearing in light of the coroner's report that came down. So death by accident, drowning, that's the verdict. And then apparently there were some screams heard, but perhaps not what is reported, and that maybe she was subjected to some criminal activity. Poor thing. And having talked to other people and heard some other research that it is possible to add water to the lungs of a deceased person if other things are going on with the body, and that the body could be just then placed in the water some days later after it was finished with, for want of a better term. And so he goes on to say that we tracked with accurate results the same code, the transfer from undertaker to burial plot between the 5th and the 8th of March. But there were 2 undertakers responding, which was interesting. And that, he says, could fit the position of fluids being given, as it could be for funeral preparations, etc. But by remote viewing, he was also able to see more, as you have seen with the Madeleine McCann work just briefly. And then there were 4 persons in a medical centre who had vanished from their residences but showed up in police headquarters. These also had a link with Nicola Bulley. Yeah, so I'm just going to leave it there for the Nicola Bulley case. And then Peter has also been asked to have a look at the ancient Ram Inn.
Now I'm just going to give you a little story. Last week I was approached by a lady who owns something called the Ancient Ram Inn near Slimbridge, and she said, I've been told about the work you do with colour codes. Can you possibly help me with my ins to what we may have? We've got a flooded basement. We think there's burials in the wall. And I'm just interested if you can go over and see what you can find. So I said,
and just to give people an idea where this is in England.
Yes, it's in England, yeah, in Slimbridge.
Sort
I've
of
never been.
Gloucestershire area.
Yeah, Gloucestershire, right. I've never been there, and I don't like going to where I'm being asked to do things because I don't want to be influenced by that. I don't mind going after, but before I like to do it remote viewing from here to there and I found 2 underground chambers, basically, one flooded and one not. This is the inn here, right? And here's a road going through that was once a track. I found burials this side of the road, all male, all the way down there, and then down this wall here, just sort of outside the building, just along here. No other burials. I found basically ley lines cutting across and creating something here. But I also, and this is the important part about what I'm about to say, is that I picked up ghosts in here. One here and one here, but every time I went in on the property, they were moved about. So I gave her the codes here for male ghost, female ghost, and a child ghost is just the change. You change 4 to 3 instead of 4, it goes to 3 if you're a child. And basically, I had the sense that there was something in there. Now, I've noticed that in the Royal Hotel Weymouth, they've got ghosts on the 4th floor, and they were caused by a fire with the mother and children trapped on the building next door. So they then crossed over to get rescued on that roof, and they couldn't. So when the building was rebuilt, they were ghostified, and the spirit of the ghosts haunt the 4th floor. Get caught in a fire, and therefore haunt the pub. And she came back in written form. She said, 10 out of 10. She said, 2 people died in the church nearby, and they used to frequent the pub, and they still haunt the pub, Albert's one, and they go into the pub and they wander around the pub. And they've actually had groups studying this phenomena in the pub. Now, I've picked that up from here in Kent.
And how old is this pub, just to give people an idea?
1050, and it was a Saxon burial. And she said those were all male burials you picked up. He said, I forgot to tell you about the burials there. She said they're all monks. And that's because it was a Saxon religious area, you see, which was then, I suppose, then deposed, and then they created the inn here. So the track that went through there, when they dug the road, they probably dislodged a lot of graves there unbeknown, and that's why the graves mainly show on the other side of the road. And then these the graves that they thought were in the house were actually on the boundary of the house. So basically, and also I found out why the cellar was flooded, because they got a spring water run going straight across there. But they would have had wells, you see, in a church, religious thing like that, and also an inn would have had a well. So the spring water sprung a leak from the general run and has gone into this thing there. And we've also got tunnels, the ancient Bronze Age, what we call the Bronze Age tunnels, which are all over the world, these kilometre-long tunnels, because basically, if we talk about the space people, which I think we can now start to talk about without making it look a little bit odd, it was so damn cold that they had to live underground. And according to the Crockford team, they used to grow their food by having crystals in the cave systems, creating crystal energy to grow the food they needed. And they very seldom came out because they had the water. They made sure they had a water run in there, and they had the food in there and ventilation, and they lived under there and only came out when it was necessary to come out. And then, of course, those tunnels later on were adopted by the Druid, Bronze Age, things like that. And the Romans had a great job in trying to clear them out and stop it all, you know. But the thing is, I strongly believe that these tunnels go back to another ilk in human history. But definitely we picked those tunnels running straight up there. And as I said, we've got them in Tunbridge Wells, Geoffrey Crockford in Hertfordshire, and we got them overseas where I've been. And they're usually a kilometre long, and they usually run in parallel, and there's usually chambers going from one side to the other. And they're basically underground military complexes from a time that we have very little knowledge about. But I think a lot of people have a knowledge about it, but they keep it very close to themselves. And ancient aliens and ancient archaeology, of course, is bringing that up on the channel, the Blaze channel, all the time, nearly every day, in some form or other. And there are PhD studying this. I mean, Geoffrey Crockford was a PhD, and he used the colour system that I've got because I was able to get, as we did with other experiments today, plutonium, strontium, cesium, nuclear fusion, and things like that. Well, you wouldn't want to be sort of mucking about with true chemicals like that. So therefore, you strike the codes for it, and they found that they work perfectly for them. But they had great difficulty in creating the codes themselves because they found they just petered out. They were more or less the same, but they petered out. But when I gave them the code, they stayed permanently. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a code that's been provided for Queen Cleopatra's burial and should assist and help in the detection of that, and then being able to pick up ghosts like that in somebody's property. I've also done that in California. The French asked me to look at an address in California. What could I find out? They got a lot of trouble there. So I went over there and I found there was a mother, a son and a father. So the mother and the father lived in the front and the son lived at the back. And I found that the mother and the son had been abducted because there's an abduction code. And I also found a female ghost in there. And when I honed in on that property, now that, don't forget, that's California and I'm in Kent. It ran out the house down the road. I could actually feel the energy leaving, and then there was nothing in the house, but the end of the ghost was in the road. I did this several times, so what I did, I thought, well, I won't annoy it too much. So I wrote a report to France about this, and he said, it's absolutely amazing. He said she's actually written, the lady who owns the bungalow has actually written about the ghost they live with in the house. And they both had been abducted, they'd had abductions. So the question is, they might not like to believe this, but if you've got the right access codes to 42, it will give you the information to work with if there's a real valid reason for doing it, and not what I called an annoyance or misuse of the system.
That is really fascinating.
And the lady said to me, I might add, she said, oh, what can I pay you for doing this? I said, I don't charge. I said, I find that if you start charging for things, it doesn't work.
That's not to say we wouldn't take any petrol money if we went on a field trip, certainly.
Yeah.
But...
No. But yeah, I mean, printing ink is very expensive, you know, and it costs me about 70 quid every time I need to put the cartridges in, black and white and colour and things like that. And you know, we have to work off colour maps really. But Google Earth has been a godsend for this, because you can blow it right up to within 100 metres of the soil of the Earth's surface, and you can fine tune. See, the thing is with this, when you pinpoint an area, you can blow it up manually, but it's very dangerous to have a map on top of another map, because you don't know that you're picking up information from the map below or the map you're actually looking at, you know. So Alan Hayday told me about that. I mean, I learn the same as everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So Peter also has had a look at the issue of the burial location of King Henry I. And on the map that you'll see, you can see what the results were and also the coding that he's given him. So you can always have a go yourself. Okay. Now, with the submersible, Peter and colleagues found very early on, probably before it was ever public knowledge, that there was no sign of life from the submersible, virtually almost immediately, certainly from very, very early. So there we go. And now we know that is the case, of course. That's what I wanted to share with you briefly, just to round up this Dowsing detective segment or video. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. Please remember to share, subscribe, and I hope you enjoy it. Hope you like it. And if you yourself want to try using these codes and share your results, then just please contact us through the comments section on the page. All right. Take care. Bye.
We all. Well, thank you very much, Peter Vincent.
Right, yeah.
Is it tea time, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you want a cup of tea.
I'd love a cup of tea.
I've
Thank
done
you.
the
grapefruit, right.
grapefruit.